good afternoon. This is Richard Hsu, host of Hsu Untied. Today I'm very pleased to have with me as my guest Jason Murata, who's a partner at Axinn. Jason, welcome to the program.
A pleasure to be here.
So, Jason, let me start by asking you, you have one of the more unusual backgrounds that I come across. I see you have a bachelor's in biochemistry and a master's even. Tell me a little bit about your undergraduate studies and what you were thinking about doing back then.
Sure. Coming out of high school, much like many other kids, I sort of migrated to where I had some interests in terms of my studies. So biotechnology and chemistry were the types of things I was very interested in as a youngster going through high school. And so, I was naturally thinking about biotech being a new and really interesting area, and it held a lot of promise in terms of medicine, in terms of other technologies, crop sciences, and all sorts of other things at that time. So it was really an interesting area for me. And so that's how I found myself interested in pursuing biotechnology. It was like a lot of bachelor's programs, a very well-rounded program. We studied all aspects of biotechnology and biochemistry, from, modifying organisms and, sort of what DNA does and how it's transformed into the functional parts of, RNA and proteins and things like that, and how we can modify things, how things are different when they're in a cell membrane versus when they're excreted into the extracellular milieu, or how it affects things even internally inside the cell. So it was a very interesting program, and gave me a sort of a well-rounded sense of biochemistry, biotechnology.
You come from a family of doctors or a family of scientists or anything like that?
No, not at all. So I think I'm the first sort of the heavy-duty scientist in
Funny.
my immediate family. So.
Okay. Well, you must have liked it enough. I mean, you went in to get a graduate degree. Were you thinking about pursuing a PhD or anything like that?
Now, I knew very early on that I had no interest whatsoever in a PhD. One of the things that I didn't like so much about pursuing science further was the need to really focus and to narrow onto very small area in terms of pursuing future research. So I first actually applied to law school and got into law school.
Hmm.
And what I can't remember how it came about, but in talking to one of the intellectual property professors, we decided to start up a program which allowed me to get a master's concurrently with my law degree. So you've seen like the JD MBA programs, for example, or law and social work and things like that. Well, this was something that hadn't been done before at Washington University, and actually I'm not aware of any other schools that have done it, but we partnered with actually, it was the night school program, because it was more class focused rather than the research focused, and we set up a joint master's and law degree program.
Interesting. So you're reading biology books by day, law school books by night, or something like that?
Flip the other way, but yes, absolutely, exactly right. I had night classes. Just like every other program, we were able to transfer credits right back and forth. So I didn't have to do the full set of classes, but I still had to take 2 or 3 classes every semester at night, and talk science and then talk law during the day.
Well, what made you decide to apply to law school out of college? I mean, how did that come into the picture? Because it doesn't sound like that was your career goal when you started college.
Yeah, so really late into college, I didn't have a sense as to where I wanted my career to go. I'm not one of those planners like so many other people are. And so I was really exploring a lot of different options. And one of the things that I really found myself interested in was about regulation of biotechnology, and about sort of rights and how rights can be a barrier to innovation, but they can also promote innovation. And so really, understanding different policies behind innovation and promoting competition was something that really fascinated me late in my undergraduate career. And so that's why I thought law would be a very good fit for that.
What was it like doing law and science at the same time? It sounds like a real right brain, kind of left brain thing. Did you find yourself liking one more than the other, or what was it like?
Yeah, it was different. That's the legal curriculum asks you to talk about cases from both perspectives, right? And if we change this, how would it affect outcomes? And challenging the notion that, there really is sort of one right answer, a wrong answer, and to find ways to parse things. Science is rather different, right? There is the right answer, and there's a lot of wrong answers, and it tends to be a little bit more black and white. Of course,
Mm-hmm.
that's not always true. And one of my favorite classes actually was biological history, which looks back at eugenics and other policies built around science and pseudoscience, and sort of understanding how those policies came into vogue and how they ultimately found their demise. But um, I think it was very interesting in terms of the approach, right, to learning and understanding. But at the same time, I think they both complement each other very well, in that both science and law it really is, rigorously analyzing a problem to get to a solution, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so I think from that perspective, science was very good, both in undergrad to prepare me for law school, but also during law school, having that science background, and sort of being able to draw from that, because I think that at the end of the day is where lawyers' strengths should be, which
Yeah,
is in that
yeah,
sort of
yeah,
same degree
yeah.
of rigorous analysis and digging for evidence to support those answers.
Now you're obviously an IP litigator. How did that decision come about? Did you kind of hone in on that target practice, or did you kind of stumble into it?
Yeah, so it's something that was obviously in the back of my mind right from the beginning. But I was very fortunate, in my young years as a law student, which we had a diversity career program in St. Louis,
Hmm.
and that was specifically for 1L students. And as part of that, I was able to spend a summer at Monsanto, which
Mm.
has gone through various uh, obviously changes over time. But back then, and it still is today, a biotechnology company that worked on modifying crops so that they were resistant to their premier herbicide or weed killer, which is of course Roundup.
Yeah,
And from through that, I learned a lot. And
I'll
there's
bet.
everything from regulatory hurdles, both in terms of food and drug, and other types of regulatory issues. There are, of course, products liabilities issues. There are IP issues, and everything under the sun there. I mean, they had basically a small law firm there at the time, and so I got a exposure to a wide variety of issues, and they were all cutting edge, and actually, and they were really all interesting issues. But certainly, I found that these IP issues are really interesting, because they are, that's where the technology truly is cutting edge, right? And these are things that aren't, in many cases, they aren't even products yet, right? And they're just kind of in their infancy, and yet here we are talking about them and thinking about what the applications will be many years into the future. Right? It was absolutely fascinating from both the legal aspect, but also the business aspect behind technology and innovation.
Yeah. So is that kind of how your IP litigation career got launched from there?
Yeah, so the second summer, I was able to find a position with a IP specialist firm in Chicago, and from there, I was able to see both sides of things, whether it's patent prosecution, so acquisition of the patent rights, to
Mhm.
also litigation and enforcing patent rights and defending patent rights, and so it was a great experience, and that really allowed me to delve into patents a heck of a lot more. That was
Yeah, yeah, I'm sure.
definitely very interesting.
So what is your practice now? How has your practice evolved? Are you a pure patent litigator? You're mostly defense, plaintiffs? What is kind of your how has your practice evolved?
Yeah, so my practice focuses on IP litigation right now. It also involves a fair amount of client sort of just consulting around IP risk management, whether it's from a freedom to operate, or they hear about a competitor doing something. Let's talk about what our strategy should be. those types of things.
Mm.
But I'd say probably still about 80% of my practice focuses on IP litigation.
Mm.
Our firm, we are about 50%, 60% on focused on generic pharmaceuticals.
Hmm.
And so representing generics and trying to bring those products to market quicker,
Yeah.
notwithstanding patent coverage, and also other areas like technology and other things. So that's the bulk of my practice. We also do have a substantial competition practice, and many of our cases these days also have an antitrust or competition component to them, because of course patents are the government granted right to exclude others, which is in many respects anti-competitive, but antitrust laws are there to prevent anti-competitive conduct. So there's a good tension there, and I think right now that's a very hot item, given the way the government is focused on really trying to avoid the anti-competitive conduct. So we're seeing definitely much more of that going on in our practice right now.
So do you find you get to use your science background a lot? It sounds like you do.
Yeah, in pretty much every case. So, while a lot of my cases are not biotech specific, but at the same time, a lot of the principles will be sort of the same, right? Things that you learned early on about, thermodynamics and kinetics of reactions, and, sort of how, drugs may interact with the human body, or, those types of things. There's a lot of, how to analyze data. That's at a very basic level also. So, in every case, the training is definitely invaluable, and and it's very transferable across many of the different technology areas that we find our cases in.
Do you think your clients can tell you have the science background? Can they tell by the way you ask questions or what questions you ask?
Very often they say, it sounds like you know a thing or two, but I think a lot of it though is just a natural curiosity, right? So when you go in and talk to a client, one of the first things that I think is extremely helpful is to actually read about their products and understand their technology areas, right? So if they're going to be talking about an extended release pharmaceutical product, well, number one, what is that, and what type of approaches are they using? How does that impact the release profiles? How does that impact the way it enters your body, and therefore the pharmacokinetics, right? And things like that. Looking at it in a very methodical way, so that you understand what might be discussed in any given meeting. I think that's a very important thing, and it's probably helpful for anyone who is talking to an existing or prospective client. But I think it's that, again, from the science perspective, having that sort of curiosity and needing to dig down and understand things that at least partially drives that.
It sounds like, if anything, you need to stop yourself from doing too much of that reading.
Well, IP law sounds a lot like science, right? Patents look like scientific documents, and there's a lot of science in them, but they're at the end of the day a legal document, more so than anything else, right? And that's why we as lawyers are here, is to sort of translate what looks scientific and into what's legal, and what's legal into what's scientific. And so it's a challenge when people want to just talk science, because like, well, no, that sounds all good and well, but this is actually the legal thing that we have to deal with. And but at the same time, it's very helpful to bridge that gap with some science talk too.
Yeah. Well, Jason, this has been a fascinating conversation. I really appreciate your taking the time. As I said, I think your background is super unusual, and I really appreciate your taking the time to share it with me.
Well, it was an absolute pleasure. Thank you for the invitation.
This is Richard Hsu and Jason Murata. Thanks.